Boy, oh boy, did the San Francisco Giants need that. They pull off a split after losing the first two games of this four-game series against the Cardinals. Buster Posey day, great vibes all the way around on Saturday, blowout win, and then they pull off a tight win on Sunday, and man, did they need that. So we'll talk about how the Giants were able to do it and look ahead to what's next for the team next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites, Beyond the Box Score, and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And where we're going to start today is just the overall mood after being able to salvage a split in this four-game series with the Cardinals after losing the first two. I thought, honestly, in the second game that they were going to win it, but they don't, and it was very disappointing, and then they needed to win the next two to salvage a split, and they did. With the second loss in the series, the Giants had lost 5 in a row, which was the first time they had lost 5 games in a row since August 2020. So they didn't do it all of last year. And with the 2 wins and the salvaging of a split, the Giants improved to 16-12. They have a plus 24 run differential. They continue to underperform the expected win-loss record by 1 win. So when you outperform your opponents by 24 runs through 28 games, the expected record for you is 17-11, and the Giants are 16-12. And so the reason I talk about that is because that's actually more predictive of what you're going to do moving forward versus your actual record. So with a team like the Colorado Rockies coming into town next, they actually have a 16-12 record, the same as the Giants, but they have a minus 13 run differential. They've been outscored by 13 runs on the season. And ordinarily, you would expect that would lead to a record of 13-15. And so the Rockies are overperforming. And hey, due for a little bit of regression, why not have it start now with them coming to San Francisco, playing a good Giants team, Carlos Rodón on the mound? For me, the stars are kind of aligned for these things to correct in this upcoming series. So we'll get to that a bit later. But offensively, the Giants broke through. They had only scored 1 run, I think, in 4 consecutive games, at least 3 consecutive games. I think it went 1-1-1-2. So they were really scuffling offensively for a stretch there. But also overlooked in that stretch was that they were allowing a ton of runs as well. They were allowing like 7-8 runs a game and scoring like 2 or 3. So they were just consistently getting blown out. It really started with that Nationals series when it was the Giants getting uncharacteristically hit around by the Washington Nationals, who are now 10-20 with a minus 30 run differential. So baseball is weird sometimes, and for me, the Giants are too good of a team for that to keep happening, especially when they have guys coming back and getting healthy, and that's what we were able to see a lot of over the last few days. And specifically, we welcomed back Brandon Belt from the COVID IL, and we welcomed back LaMonte Wade Jr. from the IL. He had been out all season with a knee injury, and he was able to come back for this series. And he made an impact. He certainly made an impact yesterday. Hit a game-tying 2-run homer because the Giants, even in their 2 wins, they fell behind early, which has unfortunately been a consistent theme for them recently. They keep falling behind early, and for the longest time, it felt like their offense wouldn't be able to pick them up. But thankfully, these last couple of games, the offense has been able to pick them up, and specifically with homers and early homers. And that is an identity of this team. Wilmer Flores with a huge grand slam on Buster Posey Day in the first inning. I think Logan Webb had given up a run in the first inning himself, and then the Giants answer with 4 in the first and then 4 in the second, and ended up winning 13-7. So a lot of good things happening offensively. Giants made a lot of roster moves over the last few days. For me, that's part of what prevents them from long losing streaks, because they make moves. They're not just going to sit with guys who aren't performing, or they're just going to force the issue a little bit and shake things up and make moves to ensure that they have a fresh pitching staff each and every day, and they have a full bullpen of guys who can impact the game in a positive way. So they made a lot of those types of moves, a lot of movement. Sam Long and Mauricio Jovera were optioned over the weekend, and in corresponding moves, they were able to activate LaMonte Wade Jr. They called up Sean Jelly, who made his major league debut. And then before the game on Sunday, one day later, they optioned Sean Jelly and Jason Vossler, and that's when they reinstated Belt and Dominic Leone from the COVID IL. So a lot of these moves working out, and all of these players who get called up make an impact, and then they might get sent out. Jakob Junis is an example. He was here, made an impact, got sent out, and as soon as he was eligible to come back, essentially, he came back and made this start yesterday and was pretty darn solid, and now they're saying that he's in the rotation for the foreseeable future. And so they just sometimes option guys in order to maximize their roster in every given day and every given series, and it's hard to argue with the results. And I think that also adding fresh blood gives them some renewed sense of, optimism isn't necessarily the right word, but they're just not stagnant. And I think that is energizing for the team as a whole. So I want to get into some of the more specific things about what's going on with the Giants. How about just the overall offense, just to check in with them now? They do have a 106 weighted runs created plus on the season, a 237 average, 318 on base, and 374 slugging. They've kind of honed in their strikeout rate as a team. People joke about this, but it's not too far from the truth. But Joey Bart is skewing the team strikeout numbers quite a bit. It's pretty crazy. The Giants' team strikeout rate is 22%. Bart's strikeout rate is 44%, so he's double the team average. And the Giants are walking a lot more, and I think they're showing a lot more patience. These last few days, I think it was Kapler who said it, they've looked more like their vintage selves, with a lot of patience and power. And yesterday, they went the entire game until 2 outs in the bottom of the 8th. Their last hitter of the game was Jock Peterson. They hadn't struck out in the entire game, and then Peterson struck out, which is just kind of sad and funny. They couldn't quite make it all the way through. It would have been the first time in any game in Major League Baseball that a team had not struck out in the game since 2017, and it would have been the first time for the Giants since 2008. So unbelievable, almost accomplishment. We don't get to count it, obviously, because he struck out, but it was good to see the way that the offense was kind of rolling the last couple days. Like I said, Wade Jr. hit a big home run. Flores hit a big home run. Mike Yastrzemski hit a splash hit that gave the Giants the lead late in the game yesterday, and that was a lead that they would hold on to. So coming up next, I want to look at Alex Cobb, who just continues to pitch extremely well. The surface level numbers might not show it, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper. He made a start, the first start after his kind of blow up start where he didn't get out of the first inning, and he was crazy good, like under the radar. And so we'll talk about that. And also Gabe Kapler making a risky move, but a bold move, and one that could have been unpopular, but it ultimately worked out. So we'll zero in on one of those and talk about why they do what they do in just a minute. But first, our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. We're seeing a lot of those right now. If you follow Locked On Network, I think is the Twitter handle, Locked On Podcast Network on Twitter, they're putting a lot of those out right now, and you can take a look. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, I want to do a little bit of a deep dive on Alex Cobb, just because I'm simply that impressed with what I've seen in terms of the peripheral numbers. So this kind of speaks to old school versus new school. Not that it has to be a fight between those two sides all the time, but, you know, before we had more advanced numbers, you would look at something like earned run average and see that Alex Cobb's is 4.8, and you might conclude that he's not done well. But what I see when I look at Alex Cobb's numbers is someone who's much, much better than that. And the point is, the numbers I'm talking about are more predictive of what he's going to do moving forward, versus the ERA number is not very predictive in a small sample. Over a big sample, perhaps it's more predictive than the peripherals, even, because there are certain guys who can consistently over or underperform peripheral numbers for whatever reason. But in a small sample, when we're talking about 15 innings, if you've got a 4.80 ERA, but some of these other numbers are what they are, I'm looking at the other numbers as the predictive numbers, and they're spectacular. So also, I must point out, Alex Cobb has allowed 8 earned runs in his 15 innings, but 13 runs. And so that error by Jason Vossler, if that's ruled a hit instead of an error, and it was kind of borderline, he barely even touched it. So I could see them. They initially did call it a hit, and then they changed it to an error. I think it's an error, but it is kind of borderline. I know some people might think it's just a blatant error, but it was a tougher play than it looked like. I think y'all remember what I'm talking about. The first inning, when Cobb couldn't get out of it. So anyway, he has a 4.80 ERA, but it could be much worse. And so imagine if it was like a 7. That's what it could be, essentially, if that wasn't ruled an error. But so to get to the point, what I'm seeing with Alex Cobb, who started the second game of this series and the Giants lost, I really felt like they were going to win. I felt like the vibes were back and good at the ballpark, and I thought they were going to win. They could not quite pull it out, and then they went on to win the next 2. But what I'm seeing with Cobb, okay, so he has a 32% strikeout rate. League average for starting pitchers is like 21.5%, or it was close to that. It was, 21.7% a couple days ago when I made this note. And Alex Cobb is at 31.9%. So he's striking out way more batters than the average starting pitcher. His average launch angle, negative 5.4 degrees. So the average hitter is just pounding the ball into the ground off of Alex Cobb. And that is usually a very big recipe for success. And it is rare, and Mike Krukow was saying this on the broadcast, it's unusual to have a guy who can strike you out at an above average rate, significantly above average rate here, 10 points above the 21% league average, and get ground balls the way Alex Cobb does. And so the league average launch angle is 12.2 degrees, so an upward kind of trajectory. But for Alex Cobb, I mean, negative 5.4. It's not just a little better than average. It was, when I looked, number 1 in the National League. This was either yesterday or the day before when I looked. Best in the National League in terms of lowest average launch angle. So that, you might be deducing, is something that leads to a lot of ground balls, of course, right? That's what we mean when we're talking about launch angle, essentially. Is it on the ground? Is it a line drive? Is it in the air? And for him, his ground ball rate on the season is 72.5%. That is ridiculous. The league average ground ball rate for starting pitchers at the time I checked was 43.4%. So 30 points above league average in terms of ground ball percentage. And just to be clear, ground balls are much preferred as a pitcher, from a pitcher's perspective. As a hitter, you'd rather not be hitting the ball on the ground, generally speaking. When you hit the ball hard on the ground, it's still fine because you get a hit a lot of the time, but you don't get extra base hits. You may get a hit a lot of the time when you hit it on the ground hard, but you're very rarely getting extra base hits. It's mostly singles. And when you hit the ball hard in the air, that's where your slug comes, of course. And so for Alex Cobb, I mean, this leads to preventing extra base hits and preventing home runs. So he also has a 0% barrel rate against him, and that is because it's hard to get a barrel when you're beating the ball into the ground. A barrel essentially is hard contact in the air. It's a technical StatCast term nowadays, a barrel. And it has at least a 500 expected batting average, 1,500 expected slugging, and has to be hit at least 98 miles an hour. So he hasn't allowed a single one of these. So when you put it all together, he's also not really walking anybody. His walk rate is roughly average, maybe a little bit better than average, but I'm looking at the strikeouts and the ground balls. And essentially when you put those two together, I see a guy who's just going to be good. And the only thing that's led to a 4.80 ERA is that he has allowed a 400 average on balls in play, which is unsustainably high. It's just not going to be that high. If he keeps pitching, if he throws 100 plus innings, I'll bet you $1 million. Well, maybe not $1 million. Bet you $100. If anyone wants to take me up on this, that the average on balls in play is going to be below 400. And then the other number is the left on base percentage. He's only stranded 46.3% of his base runners, and that is unsustainably low. This is a number I always, every year, end up arguing with someone who doesn't quite understand this number. This number is always going to end up around 72% for an established pitcher like Alex Cobb. And some guys overperform or underperform a little bit. Like if you're a high strikeout pitcher, you're going to strand more runners. And if you've got a really good defense behind you, you're going to strand more runners, and vice versa. If you don't strike a lot of people out, and if you have a bad defense, that you might strand a little fewer than 72%. But let's just say this. For his career, Alex Cobb's strand rate is 72.2%. The league average each and every year in Major League Baseball, about 72%. It's like a magic number. And if you're a established guy, you're not like, I can't go out there and strand 72% of runners. You can't go out there and like, it doesn't qualify to us, but if you're a major league player and you're not just some scrub who doesn't really belong, then you're going to end up stranding around 72% of your base runners. It's just, for whatever reason, the magic number there. There are reasons behind it we could explain, but just that's the number. And so anyway, that's his career number. That's the league average number. But this year for him, it's 46.3%. So what we're going to see moving forward is that more of his base runners are not going to score. Right now, we're seeing a lot of the guys he lets on base are scoring, more than half of them. And that's not going to last. And he's really going to strand about 70% of them moving forward. So I just wanted to point that out. Those two numbers, I just simply look at those two, the left on base rate and the average on balls in play. That's what's making the ERA much higher than the peripherals. So the strikeout rate, the walk rate, the home run rate, all of that suggests an ERA more in the mid to low twos, actually more like low twos. The fielding independent pitching is 2.21. Expected fielding independent pitching, which is taking basically strikeout rate and walk rate and then giving you a league average home run rate on fly balls. And it's a little bit complicated, but just it's an ERA predictor, and it's at 2.04. The expected ERA, which is based on quality of contact, 1.25. And Sierra, which is, I don't even fully understand because I haven't really taken the time to look into it, what Sierra is, but it's another ERA predictor, and it's at 2.29. So when we see all of these numbers across the board, low twos, even in the low ones, we can just look at that 4.80 ERA and say, forget about it. Moving forward, we should expect much better performance. I'm not saying he's going to be the best pitcher in baseball because those peripherals suggest that, but certainly better than a 4.80. And this is just one of those examples where old school numbers, and by the way, again, the actual runs allowed is much higher than even the ERA suggests, but they don't tell the full story for Alex Cobb. So I continue to be high, very high on Alex Cobb. He's throwing harder than he's ever really thrown. He's throwing, his average fastball right now is 95 miles an hour, 94.8, which is the highest it's ever been. And he's throwing a good curveball and a good split change. and the split change is like 90 miles an hour on average, which is at times been close to his average fastball. So I'm just excited about Alex Cobb, and I think the more he goes out there, the more he's going to be able to put this all together and potentially be a big part of this Giants rotation, and a good one. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, they're pitching each and every day, as long as Webb and Cobb and Rodón can just kind of stay on the field, I think it's going to bode very well for them. And Rodón on the mound tonight against the Rockies, I feel pretty good about that as well. So coming up next, I want to talk about this decision that Gabe Kapler made and just how it exemplifies what the Giants do and the risks that they take in game, and how it paid off, even though it was risky in the sense that if it didn't work, people were going to moan and groan about it, but it did work, and that's why they do it, because a lot of the time it's going to work, even if it doesn't. If you don't love the strategy, the results speak for themselves more often than not. So all of that in just a moment. But first, summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. Throw them in your bags, in your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you're fueled and ready for your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars is that they're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both, and it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. All Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means that with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy eating it. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that with a typical candy bar that has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, as promised, I want to talk about this decision that Gabe Kapler made in a game. I think it was the second game on Friday, and how a lot of teams don't do that. And the Giants in particular, even for teams that do a lot of pinch hitting, the Giants are more aggressive kind of early in games and with decisions that might feel risky, and they make those moves, and it paid off in a big way on Friday. It didn't ultimately lead to a win, but man, were they scuffling at that point. They had lost 4 straight, I suppose, and like 6 out of 7 at that point. And so it was a big deal that they made this decision at the time, and it paid off. And so we'll talk about that. And I also want to get you set for the Rockies coming into town and preview the series for a quick second. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Recaps of MLB games with analysis from our local experts, taking fans through the season like no other network, free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, the decision was as follows. They had LaMonte Wade Jr. and Mike Yastrzemski back in the lineup, and I think it was the first game that Wade had been back. And so, to the typical fan, you see Mike Yastrzemski, you see LaMonte Wade Jr. These are like some of the bigger names on the Giants in terms of their offense, especially. And to pinch hit for them relatively early in the game is perhaps an unpopular move. And when I say it's risky for a couple reasons. Number one, if it doesn't work out, you may very well be setting yourself up in future matchup situations into a worse position, and a position where suddenly, so you've pinch hit maybe for Wade and Yaz, both left-handed hitters, with Slater and Ruff. Just by way of example, those are your top 2 kind of righties that you do this with, and that's exactly what they did. So I say by way of example, but this is the exact scenario that happened. And if it doesn't work, the idea is you're pinch hitting for those guys with guys on base, chance to score some runs, you're down in the game by a couple runs. It's funny, I'm saying all this hypothetically. This was the exact scenario. So it was 2 guys on, I think it was second and third, with Yaz and Wade coming up, and the Cardinals had gone to a lefty because they don't want to see Yaz and Wade in that situation against a right-handed pitcher. So they go to a lefty. I actually didn't write down what inning it was, but it was early. I want to say it was the 4th inning, 5th inning. And to a more conservative manager would be like, I don't want to burn these bullets right now early in the game, because for a couple of reasons. Like I said, if you pinch hit for the lefties with your righties and the righties don't get it done, then later in the game, the Cardinals can just go to a right-handed pitcher and you're stuck with those two righties that you pinch hit with. You don't have your lefties to come in because they started, so they're not on your bench. And so you lost the advantage. I mean, you had the advantage but didn't come through, and then in the future, you don't have the advantage, and it can be exploited in a way. The other risk is with your own fan base. If it doesn't work out, people are going to moan and groan about it and be like, why the heck did they do that? And then later in the game, it can be a bad look when you're exploitable with your two righties. And if you had just left in Yaz and or Wade, then they can't do that. And then if they go to a lefty at that point, then you can go to your righty. So there's this whole thinking about it's like better to save your bullets until late in the game. Well, the Giants don't really play by those rules. They are willing to make these moves early in the game if they think the game is kind of on the line there and that it's a big high leverage spot. They're not afraid to take their starters out of the game in the fourth inning. So I wish I had written down the inning. It would take me too long to like pull it up while I'm talking here, but it was early. It wasn't like the seventh inning. So anyway, they pinch hit for Yastrzemski and Slater didn't get it done. He did something that was unproductive, whether it was a pop out or a strikeout. And so with two outs and guys on second and third, it would have been easy to just say, you know what, I don't want to burn A, LaMonte Wade Jr. and B, Darren Ruff because of what I just said in that situation. But especially given that Darren Ruff has been struggling all season long. So it's like you're going to take out LaMonte Wade Jr., a guy you've been begging to come back. Like fans have been wanting him back. Your team has needed him back, and you're taking him out early in the game and putting in Darren Ruff, who struggled all year long. It's a risky, bold move by Kapler there. On paper, objectively, I think it's the right move, and that's how they do it. They're not getting caught up in like the emotions of it necessarily. And also, it was just a aggressive move, and I think they want to be the aggressor in these games and scenarios. So they put in Ruff. Like on paper, you're getting Darren Ruff, who's killed left-handed pitching, killed them the last few years with the Giants, against the lefty, two guys on, second and third, down by 2 runs. It just makes all the sense in the world, objectively. And what does he do? He hits a 68-point-something mile-an-hour jam shot to the right side, and there's nobody there. And it was just so fitting and relieving, and like Kruk and Kipe say, like they freed the hostages in that moment, and they tied the game, and it paid off in a big way. They didn't end up winning. I thought they were going to win that game. I just felt like the vibes were back at Oracle Park, but it didn't end up happening. But I just wanted to focus on that moment and say that's why they do it. And everybody gets involved, and showing the faith in Darren Ruff, who then went on to hit his first home run of the year in the next game, starting against a left-handed pitcher. And I think he got on base at least a few times on Sunday as well. So I think that for Ruff personally, it probably, I don't know if it changed his mindset or gave him more confidence or whatever, but he's started to swing the bat better here lately. So just wanted to point that out. So getting you set for the Colorado Rockies coming into town, the preview, like I said, is that I think they're overperforming. This is a team we expected to be below 500 coming into the year, and I continue to expect that out of them, especially when we look at the fact that they've got a negative run differential. It's hard to maintain a winning record when you're getting outscored on the season, and so you generally don't. And when you see a team, like I said, outperform or who has a negative run differential and a winning record, we should expect maybe some losses are going to start coming. And for the Giants, they're underperforming their run differential by a win. And so for me, the stars kind of align here. And this is a series where if anything less than 2 out of 3 would be a big disappointment. And hopefully you can go out there and maybe sweep this Colorado Rockies team. So coming up tonight, Carlos Rodón on the mound for the Giants. Chris Bryant not healthy for the Colorado Rockies right now, so we're not going to see him. Trevor Story is gone. So this is a team you should be able to beat. And for the Rockies, we're going to see Austin Gomber, a left-handed pitcher. He was actually the centerpiece of that Nolan Arenado trade. So fitting. The Cardinals leave town with Arenado, and now Gomber and the Rockies come into town. But he's a lefty, so look out for that lefty lineup. Slater and Dubon at the top. Probably not going to see Wade in the starting lineup. Probably not going to see Jock Peterson. We have been seeing Yastrzemski, and Yastrzemski, man, the results are showing up, and that splash hit was very impressive. It came against a lefty. I think Yastrzemski has looked very good to me, and his first couple of seasons in the major leagues, he looked to handle lefties pretty well. Single season platoon splits, we're always talking about how they don't really matter, but to me, just watching him against lefties, he looked comfortable the first couple of years, did not last year. So if he can get back to being a little bit comfortable against lefties, that would be a great sign for the Giants. Look for him to be in the lineup towards the bottom tonight. We'll see if Joey Bart is back out there. His strikeout woes continue. So a lot going on here, and we'll get you more caught up tomorrow after tonight's game. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present, free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.